Good evening. I'm Detective Richard Steele, retired homicide detective with 28 years on the force in Chicago. Tonight I'm opening one of the most deceptive case files I ever worked, a case where every piece of evidence pointed to one man, but the truth was far more sinister. This is the story of a young woman found dead in an abandoned construction site, a jealous boyfriend, and a killer who planned the perfect frame-up. But as I learned long ago, there's no such thing as the perfect crime. This case taught me that sometimes the most convincing evidence can be the biggest lie. Let's open the file. June 12th, 2018. Chicago police received a 911 call at 3:47 p.m. A young boy playing where he shouldn't have been stumbled upon something no child should ever see, a woman's body in an abandoned construction site on the south side. I arrived at the scene within the hour. The victim was a young woman, approximately 20 to 25 years old. No identification on the body. But there was something else, something that immediately caught my attention. She was dressed in a black robe and wearing a distinctive mask. The Scream mask. You know the one, from that horror movie in the 90s. White face, hollow eyes, mouth frozen in a silent scream. The medical examiner counted 11 stab wounds to the chest and torso. One had pierced her heart. The weapon appeared to be an ice pick or similar narrow-bladed instrument. But here's what bothered me right away. There were no defensive wounds, no cuts on her hands or arms, no skin under her fingernails. This victim never fought back. Why? We found massive blood spatter on one wall of the construction site, but nowhere else. The blood pattern told me she was alive when she was brought here, placed on the ground, and stabbed repeatedly. The costume was rented from a local company called Party Time Rentals. We pulled their records. They'd rented out 30 Scream costumes that week. There was a themed party at a nightclub in Lincoln Park. Fingerprints from the victim's hands gave us her identity within hours. Melissa Warren, 24 years old, college graduate, worked in marketing, lived in Lakeview. Her mother reported her missing that morning when she didn't come home. Now we had a name. Now we needed a killer. Melissa's last known location, a house party in Lincoln Park the night before. The party was hosted by a man named Jake Sullivan, a public relations consultant. About 40 people attended, but Melissa didn't go to that party alone. She went with her boyfriend of 3 years, Derek Mitchell, 29 years old, personal trainer. When we interviewed Derek, his story seemed straightforward at first. He said they arrived together, had a few drinks, and everything was fine. Then around 11:30 p.m., they had an argument. What was the argument about? I asked him. Derek hesitated. I saw her talking to another guy, getting too close, you know. I got jealous. I shouldn't have made a scene, but I did. Several witnesses confirmed the argument. One guest, Sarah Chen, told us. They were in the kitchen. Derek was really angry, shouting at Melissa about some guy named Ryan. It was uncomfortable. Everyone could hear them. Derek admitted he left the party around midnight, angry and drunk. He claimed he went home alone, fell asleep, and didn't realize Melissa never came home until morning. Here's where it gets interesting. Derek's fingerprints were found on a beer bottle in an upstairs bedroom, the same bedroom where we later discovered blood evidence. And when we searched Derek's apartment, we found the rental receipt for the Scream costume. It was rented in his name. Derek Mitchell became our prime suspect. But I've been doing this work long enough to know, when everything points too clearly in one direction, you need to look the other way. We brought Derek in for formal questioning. He sat across from me in that interview room, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Not the fear of a guilty man, the fear of a man who knows he's being set up. Derek, I said, help me understand something. You and Melissa have this fight at the party. You leave angry. The next morning she's found dead, stabbed 11 times, wearing a costume rented in your name. Your fingerprints are in the room where we found her blood. I didn't kill her, Derek said, his voice shaking. I loved Melissa. Yeah, I was jealous sometimes. Yeah, we fought. But I could never hurt her like that. Then explain the costume. I rented it for the party. Melissa wanted us to match. Both wear Scream costumes. We talked about it for days. But the day of the party, she changed her mind. Said it would mess up her hair and makeup. So I wore regular clothes. The costume stayed in my car. I never even brought it into Jake's house. but it ended up on Melissa's body. I know how it looks. Someone took it from my car. It wasn't locked. I'm telling you, detective, I didn't do this. I wanted to believe him, but belief isn't evidence. Then our forensics team called with results that changed everything. The autopsy revealed high levels of a prescription sedative in Melissa's system, a drug called ambrazole, not commonly prescribed in the United States. You can only get it from overseas. This drug causes rapid sedation followed by temporary paralysis. Melissa Warren was drugged before she was killed. That's why there were no defensive wounds. Suddenly, this wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder. And Derek Mitchell had no access to ambrazole. His medical records were clean. Our investigation took a turn when we examined Melissa's credit card statements and phone record. 2 days before her death, she rented a hotel room at the downtown Marriott at 12:36 p.m. She checked out at 3:15 p.m. She wasn't alone. We pulled the hotel's security footage. The cameras showed Melissa entering with a man, not Derek Mitchell. We enhanced the image and ran facial recognition. The man was Ryan Matthews, 31 years old, a member of Melissa's scuba diving club, and according to public records, married. When we brought Ryan in, he tried to play it cool at first. "Yeah, I knew Melissa from the diving group. We were just friends." "Friends don't rent hotel rooms together in the middle of the day, Ryan," he cracked. "Okay, yes, we were having an affair. It started about 6 months ago. Melissa was having problems with Derek. He was controlling, jealous, constantly checking up on her. She felt trapped. I was going through my own issues with my marriage. We connected. Did you love her?" "I don't know. Maybe. It was complicated." "Where were you the night of the party?" "At the party, I was there, but I left early, around 11:30, before it happened." Ryan's wife, Emma Matthews, confirmed his alibi. She'd been at the party too. After the argument between Melissa and Derek, Emma wanted to leave. She and Ryan went home together around 11:45 p.m. But here's what Emma told us that Ryan didn't mention. "I saw Ryan and Melissa go into an upstairs bedroom earlier in the evening, around 10 p.m. They were in there for maybe 20 minutes. When I confronted Ryan at the party, he swore nothing happened. He said they were just talking, trying to figure out how to end things." DNA evidence from Melissa's body confirmed Ryan Matthews was telling the truth about the affair. But it also confirmed he was lying about one thing. They'd been together intimately that night at the party, not just talking. Ryan Matthews moved from witness to suspect number 2. The case seemed stuck. We had 2 suspects, a jealous boyfriend and a married lover. Both had motive. Both had opportunity. But something wasn't adding up. Then we caught a break, though it came from a dark place. While reviewing the ambrazole lead, one of our detectives remembered another case. A year earlier, a young woman named Sarah Cooper had died from an ambrazole overdose. The death was ruled a suicide. She'd been wheelchair-bound after a botched medical procedure and had struggled with severe depression. I pulled the file on Sarah Cooper's death, and there it was. During the investigation, police had questioned Sarah's boyfriend at the time of her injury. His name was Derek Mitchell. According to the file, Derek had gotten Sarah pregnant 3 years earlier. They were both young. She was 21, he was 26. Derek convinced her to have an illegal abortion at a clinic that operated outside proper medical oversight. Something went wrong during the procedure. Sarah suffered an embolism and kidney failure. She was paralyzed from the waist down. Derek abandoned her shortly after. Couldn't handle the guilt, according to Sarah's family. Sarah spent the next year in a wheelchair, battling depression. Then one morning, her younger brother found her unresponsive. Ambrazole overdose. The family insisted it was suicide, though they always suspected Derek had given her the pills. No charges were ever filed, not enough evidence. But Sarah Cooper had a brother. His name was Brian Cooper. I pulled Brian Cooper's driver's license photo and showed it to the party guests. 3 people positively identified him as being at Jake Sullivan's party that night. Brian Cooper, 24 years old, had been in that house. And according to DMV records, Brian Cooper required special vehicle accommodations. He was in a wheelchair. We brought Brian Cooper in for questioning. When he rolled into the interview room, I saw something in his eyes I'd seen before. The cold determination of someone who believes they've committed the perfect crime. "Mr. Cooper," I began, "do you know why you're here?" I assume it's about Melissa Warren. You attended the party where she was last seen alive. I did. Lots of people did. Did you know Melissa? No, never met her before that night. But you knew Derek Mitchell. For the first time, emotion flickered across his face. I know who he is. He was your sister's boyfriend. Before she died. Before he killed her, you mean. The medical examiner ruled it suicide. The medical examiner was wrong. Brian's voice turned hard. Derek destroyed my sister's life, got her pregnant, pushed her into a dangerous abortion, then abandoned her when things went bad. Sarah spent a year in hell because of him. Then one day she's dead from pills she couldn't have gotten on her own. You think that's suicide? We investigated. You didn't investigate enough. Brian leaned forward. But I did. I spent a year tracking Derek Mitchell, learning his habits, his girlfriend, his routine. And when I found out about that party, I knew it was time. Time for what? Justice. Real justice. The kind the police couldn't give my sister. Over the next 3 hours, Brian Cooper confessed to one of the most elaborate murder plots I'd ever encountered. Brian had spent months planning. He'd followed Derek and Melissa, photographed them, learned Derek's habits. He knew Derek was the jealous type. He knew about the Scream costume rental. He knew Derek would be the obvious suspect. The night of the party, Brian arrived in his wheelchair. Most people barely noticed him, the disabled man in the corner. But Brian was watching everything. He'd come prepared. In his jacket, a syringe filled with Ambrizol, an ice pick wrapped in cloth, and a small bottle containing more Ambrizol dissolved in liquid. When Derek and Melissa argued in the kitchen around 11 p.m., Brian saw his opportunity. He followed Melissa upstairs to one of the bedrooms, where she went to calm down. She was sitting on the bed crying, Brian told me. I offered her a drink, told her I understood relationship troubles. She thanked me, took the glass. The Ambrizol worked fast. Within minutes, Melissa was unconscious. Brian had already stolen Derek's Scream costume from his car earlier in the evening. He'd wiped down the ice pick and pressed Derek's fingerprints onto it, while Derek was drunk and distracted downstairs. But Brian's plan was more elaborate than just killing Melissa. He wanted Derek to suffer the way Sarah had suffered. I was going to let her live, Brian said. I was going to stab her in a way that would paralyze her, like Sarah. Make her wheelchair-bound. Let Derek see what he did to Sarah happen to someone else he claimed to love. But when I looked at Melissa lying there, unconscious, helpless, I realized Derek didn't deserve that mercy. He needed to be in prison, labeled a killer for the rest of his life. So Brian changed his plan. He stabbed Melissa 11 times, killing her quickly. Then came the cover-up. Brian dressed Melissa's body in the Scream costume. He used his wheelchair to transport her down a back staircase and out to his specially modified van. No one noticed. Everyone assumed he was just a disabled guest leaving early. He drove to the abandoned construction site, staged the body, and used a syringe to extract some of Melissa's blood. He returned to Jake Sullivan's house. The party was still going, went back to the upstairs bedroom, and poured the blood on the floor, then partially wiped it to make it look like someone had tried to clean up. Finally, he placed the ice pick, with Derek's fingerprints, in a laundry hamper where police would eventually find it. Every piece of evidence pointed to Derek, Brian said with disturbing pride. Even I almost believed he did it. But you made one mistake, I told him. What mistake? You gave Ambrizol to another woman that night, someone we hadn't connected to the case yet. Earlier in the evening, Brian had spiked another woman's drink with Ambrizol, not to kill her, but to test the dosage and timing. Her name was Amy Foster, 24 years old, one of the party guests. Amy had felt suddenly ill around 11:30 p.m. and was rushed to the hospital by her boyfriend. Doctors pumped her stomach and found high levels of Ambrizol in her system. At the time, police thought it was just a bad reaction to alcohol and party drugs. But when we tested the glass from Jake Sullivan's bedroom, the one with Melissa's fingerprints, we found traces of the same drug. And more importantly, we found Brian Cooper's fingerprints on that glass. Brian had given both women drug drinks. One survived, one didn't. That evidence, combined with Brian's access to Ambrizol through his sister's overseas prescriptions, surveillance footage showing his van near the construction site, and fibers from his wheelchair found at the crime scene, was enough. Brian Cooper was charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, premeditated homicide with aggravating factors. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Derek Mitchell was cleared of all suspicion, though the case left deep scars. He lost the woman he loved and spent weeks as a murder suspect. Ryan Matthews' marriage ended when his affair became public during the investigation, and Melissa Warren, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, became a casualty in someone else's quest for revenge. Looking back at this case, I think about how close we came to putting an innocent man in prison. Every piece of evidence pointed to Derek Mitchell. The costume, the fingerprints, the jealous arguments, even his history with Sarah Cooper. It would have been easy to close the file, call it solved, and move on. But the evidence told a different story if you looked closely enough. The ambroxol, the second drugging, the perfectly staged crime scene. These weren't the marks of a crime of passion. They were the signatures of calculated revenge. Brian Cooper thought he was giving his sister justice. Instead, he created another victim and destroyed his own life in the process. I've worked hundreds of homicides in my career. I've seen crimes of passion, crimes of greed, crimes of desperation. But the cases that still haunt me are the ones like this, where someone convinced themselves that murder was justice. Sarah Cooper deserved better than what happened to her, but Melissa Warren deserved better too. Sometimes there are no winners in these cases, only victims. Remember, the evidence never lies, but people do. And sometimes the most convincing lies are the ones built on tiny fragments of truth. That's why we investigate. That's why we question everything. That's why we never stop until we find the real story behind the evidence. This case is now closed. The file returns to the archives, but the memory, that stays with me forever. I'm Detective Richard Steele, and this has been another case from the files. Until next time. This case reminds us that justice isn't always swift, but it's always worth pursuing. Brian Cooper thought he could manipulate the evidence, frame an innocent man, and walk away free. But the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. I've got dozens more cases in these file cabinets. Real investigations, real criminals, real justice. Each one taught me something about human nature, both the darkness and the light. If you want to hear more stories from my years on the force, make sure to subscribe to Detective's True Crime Files and hit that like button. It helps more people find these true stories, and it lets me know you want to hear what's in the next file I open.